Hello, and welcome back to the GDL channel. As the title of this video may suggest, I will be going over how to use every single Tier 1 in the upcoming Season 11. Going over what every single Tier 1 is good at, what they're bad at, how I'd use them, how I would complement their strengths with suggested partners, and also how I'd cover their weaknesses with them. I have an infographic on screen for every single Pokemon on the list, so you can tune me out and just look at the screen. If you don't want to look at the screen, want to do something else in the meantime, I'll be saying similar stuff anyway, so it's not necessarily needed for that. Either way should be fine. I'm shooting for about 45 seconds per Pokemon because we don't want to be here for 20 years. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Let me know if you agree with anything, if you disagree with anything, and please tell me if you like the video, if there should be more of this type of stuff, because it's a bit of work, but I enjoy doing it, so yeah. Without further ado, I will not waste more than this minute, and we'll just get into it. So, Archaludon, new Pokemon, just got banned from OU actually. Absolutely fantastic, right? It's so reliable, its stat spread is so good, with stamina boosting, body press as an option, with an AV as a bread and butter set. I think you can definitely go for like a rock set or like a T-Wave. So there's definitely some utility in there that's not maybe expected when you're trying to switch into Archaludon. I think it's very versatile in that sense because you can also go for like a sword stance set, and you can steamroll and rain if you have Electro Shot, if you have like Politoed or Pelipper in your team, or Manual Rain. I do think you have to watch out for Ice moves and Fairy moves specifically, because generally you're allowing your Steel type to deal with those, and you have a Steel that doesn't resist either. So I'd suggest as partners cover that defensively, so like an Arcanine, or like I said, a Fizzitipity. Get something that resists both fighting and ground, so Tornadus-T is a good option. And yeah, I think Politoed, like I said, I prefer as my range setter for Archaludon because it just has that higher base PDEF, so it's a more instinctive partner. And Archaludon doesn't mind switching in anyway, right? Because you boost stamina upon taking a hit. Alright, next Pokemon. We have Baxcalibur. You cannot go wrong with this guy. This guy is such an effective breaker or sweeper, it's incredible. You can't use Skill Shot on our meta, but you know, still fantastic. You click SD with Ice Shard, you click Dragon Dance, you want to spam Glaive Rush. I think what is really good with this guy is going for like a choice band set, because your opponent doesn't really expect it most of the time, and then their switch hit takes 70% from a choice band Glaive Rush. I think you have to be careful with some big priority moves, because a lot of them are super effective on Baxcalibur. So I think having like a bulky switch in that can pivot back into it is very good. I think Slowking-G is the best, because Slowking-G beats Fairy and Fighting, unlike normal Slowking, which only beats Fighting. You can do some Future Sight pinning into Baxcalibur, you can do some Ice Body bullshit, and I also recommend like Electro-Hisui for the speed tier, so you don't always have to go DD. I like Orthworm because like Baxcalibur's best counter, so if it's on your team, it's not their team. And yeah, maybe remove some items. Remove the hazards with Blastoise or another spinner, so you can go for like any item, Scarf or whatever, without really any consequences. Next Pokemon, Cinderace, another no-brainer really. It's very good. It's fantastic offensively. You're trying to spam Fireball, U-turn, and whichever moves you need on the set aside from that. It's got that nice core change, got Will-O-Wisp as a nice option for where you don't exactly know what your opponent's doing. It's got a couple coverage moves, and obviously fantastic speed. You do have to be careful with that your moves are mostly not completely accurate, and Protect's very good to scout you. I think partnering it with Thundurus to kill bulky waters is very good. You can also have that as secondary speed control. Latias to resist 2 to 3 things this is weak to and has a very complementary stat spread. And Swampert and Sinistcha just have that type of synergy where they resist things and also like take on this guy's counters. Alright, next up we have Clefable. Clefable, to be honest, it fell off a little bit coming into Gen 9, but I think it's still a fantastic choice for certain teams. I think Clefable is fantastic when it fits on bulky teams where it's one of multiple fire walls, because then you can like make slow progress, kind of like slow down the game and play at your pace. Right? If this is your only guy holding your team together against offense, you'll probably lose. So pair it with like a Gliscor. I think the best one, in my opinion, is Salamence, because Salamence has that Intimidate, it has that really good stat spread to like really take a lot of hits as well. also Roost, Bulky Dragon, and then it can actually do a lot of damage alongside. So definitely a big recommend there. I think having another unaware Pokemon is a good shout because this can be sometimes quite passive, so pairing it with something that can run unaware for it, so you can do like Life Orb Clefable is very good. Yeah, lastly, Empoleon has a very good like complementary typing and stuff, so it kind of works. I think for a partner you should definitely focus on getting something that can also take a lot of hits, so you can kind of slowly wear down your opponent with like a combination of Pokemon, right? Alright, next up we have Deoxys-D. Deoxys-D is kind of your cheat code for enabling some broken offense months, so this is really not for stall, right? Its best usage is set up some hazards, give your teammates free switches with teleport. What this can actually do, unlike most other Pokemon, as in this meta, is TR teleport, so you can set up Trick Room, click teleport, go to like Ursaluna or go to your Conkeldurr and just do a lot of damage. You have to be careful for being too passive, because when you have this Pokemon you kind of do have to be spamming recover, and that does lose quite a bit of momentum. But really, Deoxys-D show for a turn or two, just enable the rest of your team. That's what this guy is really, really good at, so focus on getting really good broken offense. I'd recommend getting Rapid Spin as well, so you can set hazards without having to remove like all of them with default. Alright, next up we have, if you need tips for Dragapult, then ask anyone except for Ryan. This Pokemon's fantastic. Pair it with like a status absorber, maybe like Scissor Priority. It's amazing, just draft it, man. Dragonite is an absolutely fantastic tank. It can like, really abuse that best out of that like multi-skill, so you can really take the hits that nothing else can. In that sense, you have really strong extreme speed to mix in, you have really strong coverage moves, mostly on special side, and also Draco Meteor is your best stab, which is also special. But you can go for easy good mix sets, you can go for bulky DD sets, or just bulky sets in general, like Roost 3 attacks. It's very good in that sense. You have to be careful of like Ice, Spear, and Rock Blast, like multi-hit moves are super effective. And it does kind of lack power sometimes, because if you're going for like a physical sweep, you're relying on like 80 base power moves. I think pairing it with Hatterene is a very good shout, because it really discourages setting rocks, which means you can like have more item versatility. Like Weakness Policy is fantastic in this guy. Cobalion has a very good complementary stat spread. Recommend that for sure. For a tier 1 pairing, I'd go probably for Iron Moth, because it hits the things that a Dragonite like doesn't really hit that well very hard. Iron Moth can really either sweep like a booster energy speed set, for example, or like a booster special attack plus agility after Dragonite's done its work, or you can damage things with Iron Moth and then clean up with like abandoned ESP D-Knight, so it's a very complementary pairing in that sense. Right, next up we have Enamorus. Enamorus is incredibly reliable at what it does. What it does in that sense is just Specs or Scarf Moonblast, just spam the move. You can go for a Boots Coal Mine as well, which adds depth to how your opponent has to play around you. Even if like most of the time you kind of do want to go for Specs or Scarf, right? Also there's a physical set where like Contrary Superpower plus Play Rough can be abused. So you have quite a lot of mind games on that first couple of turns where your opponent doesn't really know what you're going to do. Especially on like one of them sets, you can like fit in the last move Healing Wish, and suddenly your big threatening sweeper in the back is like back and full again, you know? It's very reliable in that sense. You have to be careful of like Scarfers and stuff, because you're not that bulky, and most of the time you don't want to run Boots on this, which means you're going to be worn down pretty quickly. I think Excadrill is the best partner, because you resist most things this guy's weak to, and actually you resist everything this guy is weak to except from ice, right? And you get the spin immediately as well, so you don't really have to rely on Boots. You get complementary offense. Aside from that, I think Swampert does something similar defensively. Metagross brings really good defensive typing, and Bullet Punch at the same time, and Landorus-T, so you don't have to run Scarf, is also a good shout. But anything fast works for that slot, right? Alright, next up, I've just mentioned them, Excadrill. I think this is an offensive menace. It's got this spin, speed boost, and suddenly it's faster than your whole team. It's got the late game potential for cleaning very easily. Like sometimes you only need one sword stance if it's like in the sand, or you only need a spin in the late game when you have Life Orb, for example. I think it struggles against some bulky grounds and waters, and it struggles against like Mach Punch, for example, right? So I think pairing it obviously with a Sand Setter is very good. Pairing it with something that can kill these bulky grounds and waters like a Keldeo is very good. And I like pairing it with Magneton because sometimes you don't want to play the bulky role of the Steel type with this Excadrill. And Magneton can do that being in a lower tier. You can slap on the Violet, it's pretty bulky. And it also traps the few Steel types that actually beat Excadrill, right? So if you're facing against Earthworm or Skarmory or Corviknight, you can just come in with Magneton and they're stuck. Unless they're a Chet Shell, but just knock that shit off already, I don't know. Definitely fits well more like offense-focused teams with Sand. And I think late game is when it really makes the best out of its talents. Next up, Garchomp. Garchomp is another one where you can't really go wrong because it's got so much going for it. You have a really good tank roll where you can just kind of hit things. You can wall break, you can slap on a choice band if you want, or just like a sword stance set. You can't skill shot, but that's what it is. Scarf is still very good. Rookie Helmet, Rough Skin's obviously very good, and you can just stack spikes all day. It does have a bit of 4 moves of Syndrome because you can't set like both hazards, or you can't set a spike and also run like Fire Blast and Iron Head and all the coverage you need or a setup move. So it's a little bit kind of messy in that sense, but you can definitely make it work, right? I think Gengar is a fantastic partner because Gengar beats both the fairies and the grasses that haunt Garchomp. I think Gardevoir has a very good defensive and offensive typing combination. And I think going for Bisharp and Empoleon's smart because they both have a decent defensive typing that goes well with you. And they really punish, if you set hazards and you bait like a Defog, you can really punish that with either Defiant or Competitive here. So I think that's why both of those are good partners. But I don't think you can really go wrong with Garchomp. Just pair it with something else that's really going to hit hard specially. Alright, next up we have the big Don Gholdengo. Gholdengo is something that's so good. It works on so many team styles. Its best is obviously on like hazard stacking because you can really just double down on it so hard, because when you have Gholdengo they're always going to be afraid to click a Defog or a Rapid Spin or a Mortal Spin and just completely bonk into you, right? So my partners for it are definitely the ones that I can add to this hazard pressure. So Samurott-Hisui is a very good one. Clefable for the same reasons, kind of. Archaludon can help. I think Sandy Shocks can bring the plus 100 speed here and also help set up hazards. You do have to be careful because you don't always want to run Scarf on this guy. You want to kind of go for like nasty pot sets half the time. And you don't always have the move slots available to go like recover and nasty pot and your coverage moves. So it's a little bit of a mix and match. You can probably work out though. It's very good. Yeah, no one else to say really. Next up we have Gliscor. Gliscor is fantastic. I think this is such a good backbone for your team, kind of like Deoxys-D, because as soon as you have that first safe entry, you do need to be careful before like switching into a knockoff, right? As soon as you have the safe entry, you have a knockoff absorber. You have something that's basically resisting physical moves. It's incredibly reliable at that, also sending spikes all game, and like providing that hazard pressure is very good. You do have to be careful with this guy because it is going to be item bound, and it's pretty easy to snipe with like random ice coverage. I think partnering with something that doesn't mind switching into those moves is very good. So Volcanion's my example because it is immune to water and resists ice ×4. I think Reuniclus is very good because Reuniclus is immune to hazards with Magic Guard, which means you can kind of just come in with Gliscor, set spikes without really caring if your opponent does it back to you, right? So you win a hazard game that way. Aside from that, Landorus-T might be nice, just for like good special rolls, and if you have those two up the ground, then Earthquake just becomes very bad against your team, which allows you to have a lot more flexibility with the rest of your team later on, because there's obviously a lot of teams that are ground weak. And when you're using Gliscor, you're really trying to focus on making a team that's as little ground and as little spikes weak as possible, right? So you can really get the most out of just stacking without caring what they do. Right. Next up, we have Gouging Fire. Absolutely fantastic Pokemon. It's really good offensively, it's really good defensively. It can do really good bulky setup. That's probably my favorite set, like a really bulky, like Morning Sun, DD, maybe like Breaking Swipe as an option because that's what's been doing OU. You can really set up on like Great Tusk and stuff. It's really nice. It's really versatile in that sense. But you can also always just go like Choice Band or Booster Energy Attack and just hit things. But you can bring this most games, right? I pair it with Bronzong because it resists everything that Gouging Fire is weak to. Torkoal can be very fun for like just sun abuse. You slap on like a tier 3 Venusaur and suddenly you're just beating everything. I think my tier 1 partner will be Greninja because Greninja has such a good offensive complementary like stat spread with this. It does the speed control for you, so you don't have to be Scarf or anything, and it hits very hard, especially on multiple types. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Gouging Fire. I think Great Tusk is something you don't really need usage tips for, to be honest. It beats physical Pokemon pretty much. It's always going to threaten to either kill you or rapid spin away the hazard that you set. So it's very good in that sense. It's versatile because you can always go for like a booster speed bulk up set. One of my favorites. I think it has a very nice speed tier for what it's trying to do. I do think you have to be careful of Captain Pookie. You might have to deafen for about 5 seconds. Grass Knot, right? And another issue is that you're using Close Combat and Headlong Rush as your attacking moves, which lowers your own stats, so you might not be invincible because of that. I'd say pair it with Landorus-T and maybe Wish, so you can resist basically everything this guy is weak to with the first one, and then Wish this guy back up so you get the most out of this really good stat spread and really good typing. Next up, we have Greninja, I just mentioned. So Greninja, first thing, you don't use this guy's defensive typing at all, right? Don't worry about that, don't bother. What you want to do with this guy is just attack, just whatever's in front of you, you kind of will like, you want to hit it, you want to make some predictions on the switch. That can also be a Spike or a T-Spike, which is really nice. But it's such a good fast pivot and revenge scaler that it works for anything that's like not really that fast, but very strong as a really good partner. So like we just had Gouging Fire, but something else like Mammothswine, right? And you also might want to pair it with like a defensive water, so you have that role on your team. Alright, next up. Ting-Lu, alright. Heatran. Heatran is fantastic because it does so many things very well. Yes, you have to run away from a lot of random earthquakes. Now, like your opponent Slowking-G is gonna have earthquake just to kill your Heatran, right? But as long as you play that a little bit carefully, it's a fantastic Pokemon because it's got so much going for it. So many like nice moves, especially Magma Storm is fantastic. There's a bit of a trade-off always to go Magma Storm or Lava Plume, which is a bit, you know, that's a bit of a move choice that's gonna inevitably have drawbacks. I'd pair it with Rillaboom for obviously the obvious. I'd also like to point out Clodsire and Mandibus because you want to be able to click Toxic and Toxic Spikes for the rest of your team. So Magma Storm wearing down the opponent's very easy with Heatran because they're already going to be poisoned, right? So think about that offensive team synergy to bring the best out of Heatran in that sense. Alright, we have Hydreigon. Hydreigon is something you should draft if you need offensive partners to your fast physical attacker. So I'm looking at, obviously I've listed 2 of them, Sneasel, Cinderace. I think Iron Boulder is also a fantastic one. Everything that like appreciates Hydreigon's special attack and prowess, decent defensive typing, switching in and pivoting is where you're going to shine. I think it obviously has an extra weakness they have to be careful with, and also it's quite prediction reliant. Iron Tread is a good partner defensively, so Slowking-G. Shit that can like really help defensively and keep up pressure going to the next guy. Alright, next up. Oh, I just mentioned him. Iron Boulder. Iron Boulder is in its best shape, in its best form is definitely the late game cleaner, boosts energy speed, click swords down to win the game, right? But that's mostly a late game Pokemon. So what you can really do with this guy as well is run like Choice Band and Choice Scarf and be more effective early in the game. This guy has an absolutely dog shit like defensive typing. It can switch in easily on like bulky psychic types because you do have good Spadef, but that's it. And it doesn't really beat bulky grounds or bulky waters. I really like Ogerpon Wellspring as a partner because of that, because it also helps with the speed tiering that Iron Boulder is responsible for, and it becomes less, there's less pressure on it, which means you might be able to use it more effectively. And the others are just like I said, just Hydreigon's a very good partner, and Zapdos, Heatran are like defensive ones if you want to go for like a bulkier playstyle with Iron Boulder. Yeah, next up, Iron Hands. This guy is the #1 most reliable one in the game. You can bring this to any single game, and he will do a fantastic job, regardless what the fuck the opponent has, right? It is so good at that bulky tank roll, or even like a bulky breaker with sword stance. And, you know, it's weak to like a couple types. Just get whatever is weak to that, like whatever resists. Get an Iron Crown for like getting something out of the Fairy and Psychic resist. Get your Latios so you can do like get special damage with your other tier 1, and obviously it's immune to ground and also resist Psychic. Just, yeah, if you need any incentive to use Iron Hands, it is fantastic, man. It performs every single week, and it won't fail you. Speaking of something else that won't fail you, Iron Moth. What will fail me though is the sprite not loading in. Thanks. Alright, you're back. Sorry for that. Iron Moth is also a fantastic offensive Pokemon. You really don't want to do anything defensive with this guy, so if you're drafting this, make sure your Steel type can actually switch into the Fairy as well, because Iron Moth doesn't really want to be doing it, like switching into Sylveon and like tanking a Psyshock on the switching, right? But as long as you get the like defensive role freed up for it, you don't have to do it with this. This is fantastic, because it has so many different ways to either sweep or just set up someone else's sweep. I think Zarude's a very good partner because you resist 3 out of its 4 weaknesses, all except for Rook. And, you know, you have another speed tier immediately obtained. I think my tier 1 could be Zapdos-G, because Iron Moth kind of only bunks for, like, special walls that it doesn't really have super effective coverage for. Zapdos-G kind of just annihilates all of them, right? And it has the bulk, unlike, like, a Flamingo or something, to come in on them multiple times a game and really do that for you. You do have to be careful of, like, I mentioned earlier, like, random earthquakes. Watch out for random earthquakes. And aside from that, this is just good to go as is. It's fantastic. And we have Iron Treads. Iron Treads is incredibly reliable. It's versatile because you can go for good offensive sets, you can go for defensive sets. You always have this nice speed tier. You most of the time want to just go like a Jolly like 192 plus speed, because you have to outrun the opponent's Sandy Shocks. I don't know. It's like Archaludon, you have a Steel type without an Ice resist, so pick up your Slowking, pick up your Snorlax, something like that. I think I recommended mostly defensive months because this fits in as support for so many offensive Pokemon. It works with pretty much all of them. So these are just partners that I'd suggest to synergize defensively. But you really can't go wrong. I wouldn't pick it round 1 though. Maybe around 2 or 3. Alright. Next up we have Jirachi. So Jirachi is obviously fantastic because it's so reliable. You have this 100 stats spread across the board. You can really work well with that. You can make the super bulky when you need it. You can invest it into attacking the prowess. You can go for like good stored powered sets or like weakness policy and stuff. And you have 2 ways of doing like pinning strats. So you can either do Doomsday or Overreach side and U-turn to your, I don't know, Conkeldurr or something. You know, that type of gameplay is very good with Jirachi. You do have to be careful what I call Frankenstein syndrome. So what that is kind of like where you're trying to mix and match a set to accomplish multiple roles to the point where you become incapable of doing any of them properly. So you're like trying to slot in Wish and a utility move and 2 attacking moves, and you end up with like you getting 2-shot by something because you couldn't Wish Protect, you know? It's a bit awkward always, so you have to be really careful that you don't make a set with too high of an error margin, I guess. Right. Partnering with Rillaboom for Earthquake's nice. Partnering with something that you can U-turn into is nice. And Thunderous helps because you can pronounce a T-Wave and then just spam Iron Head later. Which is a scummy strat, which is, you know, if you do it to me, I'll get upset in the post-match probably. So you should definitely do it. Next up, Kingambit. Kingambit, my favorite partner, I'm just going to get into this immediately. Zork-Hisui, because you can, for example, you be 1-1 down, and then you send in your Kingambit and it doesn't show Supreme Overlord. Your opponent's like this guy's a noob, that's definitely Zork, right? So they go to Alolan you click Sword Stance because you're Defiant and they lose the game. I love that type of shit, man. Anyway, this is mostly for the late game. Just Supreme Overlord's obviously the best ability, but you can also really try to meme with Defiant. You can, for example, pair it with Bumby because you can either fix the 50 speed with a Sticky Web, or you can bait a Defog and have that Defiant ability that one game. So you have some nice versatility in that sense. Do be careful of random brick breaks and stuff. A lot of Pokemon don't learn close combat, but just kind of play around that type of counterplay mostly. But yeah, also be careful with like getting subbed on while you Sucker Punch. Alright, next up we have Kommo-O. Kommo-O is something that really wants to be setup sweeping, and it doesn't want to be mixing like a setup sweeping set with like a Stealth Rock. It can do a very good defensive set, right? Especially with that 125 base defense and body press. But this pairs with something that's either going to be that speed tier 1 that you need, so Greninja or Enamorus, for example, or something that's going to help take the hits for you and set up some hazards so you can like sweep immediately after one Clang Wrestle or Dragon Dance. So that's really where we're trying to like zone in on right now. You do have some nice abilities that can help you in certain scenarios as well, which is nice. Next up we have Landorus-T. Landorus-T is obviously fantastic. I don't think you really need like me to tell you how good it is. It did lose knockoffs, that kind of stinks, and random ice moves do stink. For the same reasons as with Gliscor, Volcanion's a fantastic partner. I think grabbing speed coverage is very good, and I think Incineroar is a fantastic partner because not only do you have an Intimidate core, you have a Parting Shot as well, so you can technically drop 3 attack stats in like basically a turn. And you also have knockoff that Landorus-T lost. So I think that'd be my immediate partner to go to. Aside from that, you can really make the best out of this, especially with like some surprise nasty bot sets and stuff. Alright. Latias, this is another no-brainer. If you're up in the draft, you didn't look at the board, and you're up, just get this. It won't fail you. It's so versatile. It's so good defensively and offensively. Offensively, it relies more on setup than its brother Latios. But it's very good at like weakness policy sets, anything really in that sense, and you have such a nice defensive typing, you can always tag on Healing Wish last move, right? Just watch out for Toxic and getting worn down. Pair it with something that complements it defensively, so Cobaleon's my shout, because Cobaleon resists most things this guy is weak to and has that really good defense stat. I think Landorus-T, if you have Landorus-T and Latios, you don't ever have to worry about ground moves again. So really make the best out of its bulk, so you can go for like setup sets, is what I'd say. Latios is also absolutely fantastic. It's such a reliable bring every week, you just kind of hit things. Because there's very few Pokemon that actually deal with Draco Meteor and like Luster Purge now it's been buffed. And the few that do, you like flip turn on and they're like, fuck, right? It's a pretty reliable speed tier that just comes every week. You have to be careful of like faster Scarfers. And something I would recommend is pairing it with like a Sneasler for that secondary speed tier, and also going for like a Magnezone, because as soon as you like do even 70% damage to the Steel type in front of you, you have that really nice, I guess that like really nice spammable Luster Purge and Draco Meteor, right? Because most Fairy types don't love having their Spadef dropped by Luster Purge. So I mostly just make the best out of this guy's offensive moves and not really focus on like trying to be bulky like Latias. Meowscarada is fantastic because it's got this immense speed, and it has this really good like coverage, and it's all stab, right? You do have to be careful because you will probably lose your defensive typing at some point, or you lose your stab on some moves, and then you might not have the damage output needed. And you also have to be careful of like static Zapdos, even though you can kill them with Triple Axle, but that's not the point. I think pairing this guy with like a Gholdengo is great because you have this really good defensive complementary typing, and you can also, with Meowscarada, like Greninja, you have a lot of times where you can just click a spike or a toxic spike and then you can like spin block that later, or default block it, whatever. I think Baxcalibur female is a good offensive partner, and yeah, nothing else to say really. Just don't worry about anything other than just hitting things really. Alright, next up we have Necrozma, kind of the antithesis to what I just said. Difficult word there. I bet Ryan doesn't know it. Anyway, next up we have Necrozma. Necrozma has a really good Prism Armor ability plus good bulk, which allows you to go for like really solid setup sets that can really set up in front of a lot of things. You can also do bulky setup with like Cosmic Power. You can also go for bulky sets that can like really stay in the game for a long time, like with Thunder Wave, with Stealth Rock, and you obviously have a lot of power behind you. So in that sense, it's a very reliable pick for like if you have a tier 1 slot open and you don't really know what to do with it, this is going to perform most games, right? I probably pair it with something that like can help it sweep easier, like a Vikavolt when you suddenly outspeed little things. Meowscarada, because that can be your speed tier, right? Alright, next up, we switch the first of the two Ogerpons to tier 1. We have Ogerpon Hearthflame. So, Ogerpon Hearthflame is really good at stall breaking, because you have that like really strong Ivy Cudgel and Power Whip coming up this row, 120 attack with Mold Breaker, and like conventional defensive switch-ins really don't like taking a knockoff or getting U-turned on, or like being encored into Wish or something. You have to be careful because you're item bound, which means you want to pair it with like a Heatran or maybe an Espeon, because if you can scare your opponent away from certain rocks, this guy is going to be way more versatile throughout the game, right? It can't hit opposing fire types that well, so I like pairing it with Araquanid, because what Araquanid does, it also makes you faster, like proofs you from like Scarf revenge killing, and obviously resist fire through its ability. Hydreigon's a very good offensive partner, because, well, what I said with Hydreigon, I guess, and you might want to remove hazards for it. The potential case where your opponent might be able to set one up. You know, you never know. Alright, Ogerpon Wellspring, on the other hand, is something that really likes, well, it likes having that attacking versatility, right? So you have quite a lot of coverage moves that can help you in any scenario. So in this sense, U-turn's more of an offensive weapon than it is for Hearthflame, because obviously grass types resist both of your moves. Right now you can U-turn into something that kills the grass types, like Scizor or Demora. And it's really good at Trollblade sweeping in endgame as well. It is stuck to just like its item, same with Hearthflame, which means you also have to be careful of like Toxic Spikes. So I definitely would pair it with a Poison type. I'd pair it with Regieleki, because what Regieleki does is it provides the speed tier for it, and it reduces hazard weakness to spin as well. And if you U-turn from this guy to Hoopa Unbound, you can basically kill anything that Ogerpon doesn't beat, right? And Scizor's Nook support's nice for a Pokemon that also beats grass. Alright, next up we have Pecharunt. So Pecharunt, its strength is pissing off the opponent. Yeah. It does lack instant power. It kind of wants to grab a nasty plot a lot of the time, but even then it might not be able to break immediately. But this guy is such a good like stat spread for defensive typing that you can really come in a lot of physical threats that, as long as they can't like boost their attack and then hit you with super effective move, you might be good against them, right? I would pair it with a Pokemon with high damage output that also has good Spadef. So an example is Iron Boulder. It has that good Spadef mentioned earlier. Roaring Moon, Gyarados are good partners. I think Ogerpon I put because it provides a speed tier and it beats the bulky grounds that Pecharunt hates. Next up, we have Quaquaval. Quaquaval is mostly going to be a late game Pokemon if you want to make the best out of it. So you kind of want to keep this guy in the back for most of the game if you can. And then kind of just go for like one turn Aqua Step. So you kind of like set up Dragon Dance while you kill the opponent, right? With Moxie. I think it does have some good mid-game utility if you can fit a last move. You can like fix like knockoff to remove items. You can fit Roost for like a Spadef bulk upset, so you can sweep this guy earlier. It has that nice versatility, whereas before your opponent knows what you're doing, you have this like major mental advantage because they have to be prepped for even like a choice band Quaquaval, which I also think is pretty good. Because this is generally quite setup reliant, so when your opponent expects you to do that, it's really good for you. Archaludon's a good partner because it resists most of what this guy's weak to. Landorus-T beats both the electric and the water types, so that's why I recommend him. And switching into status is a good job for Shaman and also Iron Moth because you're trying to generally poison or burn this guy. So you can make some really aggressive doubles with Iron Moth. Alright. Next up, we have Raging Bolt. Obviously, this is my boy, Big Giraffe Raikou. He's very strong. I say his weakness is definitely that you kind of know he's going to be using his stab moves and not much else, because he doesn't have much else. And he also doesn't have recovery. But you can slap this on anything, on any team that just wants that like bulky pivot, that can like 1v1 a lot of things, especially with Thunderclap as like a reinforcing button for like when the first move doesn't kill. So in that sense, it's quite reliable. You do have to be careful of getting pain splits on because you have this high HP stat, which means like a Dusknoir or something can take a hit and be at 50 and it pain splits you, and suddenly he's back at full and you're like 70, right? And I pair it with like a Alomomola to really make the best out of his guy's defensive typing, keep it really healthy. Gliscor or Rillaboom as a way of dealing with earthquakes. Rillaboom obviously makes Raging Bolt take them better, and Gliscor can come in on them all day. And Azelf's just like a ground and moon fast option that can really help you force some progress. Alright, next up we have who I just mentioned, Rillaboom. Rillaboom has this really good wall breaking. It has a strong priority move, right? I think my favorite sets are personally ones where you go for like a leftover set, and you're still really strong, but you have this like better longevity. I think that's really big because this guy usually gets worn down pretty quickly when you're like spamming Wood Hammer and your opponent goes to the Flying type or the Rookie Helmet, and suddenly you're like up 40% already. I think pairing that with Heatran is the logical shout, right? Because it has such a good defensive typing and really benefits from grassy terrain, both healing it and preventing it from dying to Earthquake immediately. I definitely would pair it with an Unburdened Pokemon. Hitmonlee is definitely the best in the business at the moment. Well, Sneasler is, but Hitmonlee for its value, because you kind of want another tier 1 with Rillaboom, right? So I definitely go for like some type of stuff in that general ballpark where you're trying to enable your Rillaboom to go for like these bulkier leftover sets and get more for the team out of it. Next up, we have Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon, I think his best set is Choice Band, because you just hit things super hard on the switch when they're expecting you to like click Dragon Dance, right? I think this is something you should really pair with something bulky into your one that can like be pivoted into, so like a Deoxys-D is a good shout. A Petron can obviously like parting shot back to the Roaring Moon if need be. I'd pair it with a good Fairy Resist, and also like good Special Breakers, right? So you really want to be using, I'd say you want to be using either Boost DD or Choice Band. I wouldn't go for like Boots DD, I think it's too weak. Yes, it has 139 attack, but since you're using like Dragon Claw and Knockoff, which are good moves, but they're not like outrage, you know. But that's you can, but it's not like using like Dark Close Combat. That's what I'm kind of saying. So BP of moves kind of hold you back from doing that much direct damage unless you're going for like Booster Energy or Choice Band. All right, next up we have yeah. So this is Tobias 5,000 years in the future. We're back to Normal Salamence. Normal Salamence is so well-rounded, right? Its stat spread allows you to do basically anything, especially with Intimidate working with you. You have a nice bulky dragon that can also roost off any damage. You can be threatening all game because you can be like that bulky dragon, but your last move slot's actually Dragon Dance, and in the late game you only need one to really sweep the opponent, for example. So in that sense, it's very multifunctional and something you should definitely consider, even though there's a lot of dragon competition. I think there's a lot of ice coverage that can kind of two-shot this guy very easily, like even like an Overcoat can do it. Even though it has pretty good bulk, right? And you want boots a lot of the time, but you also want a Yachi Berry, or you might want like a Rocky Helmet to go Intimidate. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. You have to be careful, and you might have to get some good removal with it. I think a partner that I like is Gholdengo. Well, obviously. I think having a Snorlax or a Hariyama somewhere in your team is very helpful to like deal with the ice coverage really easily among like spread over multiple Pokemon. And I think Grimmsnarl has a very good defensive like typing that works with him, and with Parting Shot, with Pranks of Parting Shot, you almost have like Intimidate Core in that sense as well, which really helps. Alright, next up, Samurott-Hisui. Samurott-Hisui, well, we could also just call this guy Ceaseless Edge, right? You're clicking Ceaseless Edge, you're making the best out of this really good like hazard setting, and you have a pretty good defensive typing that, unlike your Greninja, you can actually use pretty well. You can slap an Assault Vest in this guy, and he gets pretty bulky on both sides where you need him to be. You have a Sucker Punch to follow in a Ceaseless Edge. I think this works best with like any tier 1 dragon as like an offensive partnership. Especially like we just mentioned Salamence that can like come in when there's a couple spikes up and then click DD and like go crazy with Moxie, right? I do think you have to be careful of like Scarfers, some priority moves, and it does have it has bad SPDF. I think AV might be my favorite item for it though. I'd pair it with some bulky shit, and I'd pair it with things that punish hazard removal. So I think Articuno-G is my favorite for its value, because it also has a very good offensive, like complementary typing, and competitive obviously punishes Defog. We have next up Slowking-G. Slowking-G is what you get when you have like a strong, more frail Pokemon in tier 1. I really want to get as many opportunities as you can. This guy is absolutely fantastic. It doesn't die to special Pokemon. It is so nice, right? You have to just be careful about like knockoff and stuff. But just get some good breakers in on this guy, and I think you'll be good. Porygon-Z especially, it's now tier 3, so get him in for free utility reception, and your opponent is going to be big mad. Sneasler, I think Sneasler is an absolute attacking demon, right? You can go for like fake out and burden sets for like late game sweeping without having to have a setup turn. You have to be careful of like not being able to break poison and ghost types. So I personally pair it with Hoopa Unbound, who's tier 2 now, so you can click U-turn on the expected poison type and just absolutely eviscerate what's there. You do have to rely on your teammate to take the Moonblasts from like Enamorus, because your poison type here doesn't deal with them well. So grab like a Corviknight. It's a good fit anyway. Sandy Shock's another speed tier that you might use, and it also hits ground types. Wait, sorry, huh? It also hits poison types. And obviously Indeedee for sweeping. Okay. Terrakion. Terrakion is something you want to use as an offensive tandem. So like in Gen 8 you saw a lot of Terrakion Hydreigon. So here you might maybe go for like a Terrakion Iron Moth, or anything that like appreciates Terrakion's ability to remove bulky dark types, remove bulky flying types. Because Terrakion is still one of the best in the business at that. You know, it can set up rocks on the turn where you might want that, which is really helpful. It's quite spammable, but you do have to be careful, because a lot of the times you don't want to actually click Stone Edge, because it can miss, but it is quite prediction reliant because of that whole dynamic. It's a very good Scarfer, a very good Lifer Pokemon. I think Bandit is a bit overrated. I'd probably go for Lifer most of the times, just because you can like switch up your choice after the switching comes in. I'd get one more Pokemon that's faster than it on your team, and I just get something with a really good defensive typing, so you can cover this guy's many weaknesses. But when you get the best out of this guy, he can like get you big yield. Alright, Ting-Lu is, you know, this guy is so good that I only have one page of shortcomings, not two. You know, he stays in the game so well. You can go for really good surprise factor offense sets, because you have this incredible bulk, especially with Vegetable of Ruin, like making that defense way better than it is, right? So you can really go for effective like choice band or weakness policy sets when you need to, because it has good coverage. But you really have like such reliable spikes and rocks, and you can like phase it whirlwind and like do damage ruination and stuff. I think you have to be careful of pain split from the opponent, because you have this high HP, so they can just kind of heal up to full all the time. Pair it with something that removes hazards on your side, so you know you win the hazard game. I think Lamora is a very good shout, because it also adds T-spikes that Ting-Lu can't set. Gholdengo is obviously just going to be for the BM hazard meta, and Latias can be another option in tier 1 for when you want the other one to do a lot of damage. Clefable is something that doesn't mind taking hazards, because obviously Magic Guard, so it's also a good fit in that sense. You can just kind of, like Gliscor, set hazards without worrying what your opponent does about it. Alright, next up, we're getting close to the end now. Torn-T. Torn-T is very fast, it's very reliable. You know, you can come pretty much any game and be useful. I'd say losing Defog makes AV the best set for sure. You can really spam the U-turn and knock off a Hurricane or Bleak Windstorm, whatever you want to go for. It has that really good team utility in that sense, because it's so spammable. I think you do have a little bit of a trade-off there, because I think, you know, AV is the best item, which means you're going to be taking a lot of stealth rock damage, which limits how much you actually recover. So I definitely pair it with something that can remove hazards, but at the same time, you need to pair it something that removes bulky electrics, the only thing that Torn-T really hates. So like when you U-turn to one, the U-turn on one, go to Mammoth and kill something, right? I'd say Mienshao is a great one because you have an offensive regen core, and honestly, Slowking's there because that's my boy. Torn-T and Slowking won me Season 3. I had to make the mention, man. Ursaluna. Ooh. Ursaluna is very adept at wall breaking. I think the set you see most in like our circles is like obviously the Flame Orb set. My fave is actually just like highly invested in Spadef but still adamant nature, and then like leftovers and bulk up. Or sword stance, but I think bulk. I like bulk up. I like the way of like really taking it slow and then just destroying everything. I think you have a nice defensive typing that allows that type of gaming as well. Sometimes you can actually go for bulletproof instead of guts because your opponent's still going to be scared to burn you, and bulletproof will help you in that one turn where you'd like your opponent clicks focus blast and then like oh fuck, you know. It does have high like weight and is weak to both grass knot and low kick, which makes it decently easy for random Pokemon to just like do a lot of damage to you. But as long as you get this guy in safely via like a Deoxys-D or fix the speed issues with Araquanid, it could be very good. Especially if you set Trick Room, right? Sinister covers most of its defensive like weaknesses, so that's why that guy's there. Alright. Volcarona. I think it's your late game setup. Wincon has a very good stat spread that allows that. And it has this really nice like versatility in this moveset where you can like really mix and match, like mix in Will-O-Wisp so you can actually beat the Spadef wall that is actually trying to counter you, right? I think it's quite predictable and it's obviously very item bound. I think when you don't have to run boots, nice, but usually you kind of have to go for boots for safety. Hatterene's a good partner just so you sometimes don't have to think about it. But my favorite partner is Ogerpon-Cornerstone because it OHKOs the water, flying, and rock types that Volcarona is weak to, and also the fire types that Volcarona doesn't hit. So if you get Volcarona, probably go Ogerpon-Cornerstone. It's a fantastic duo, right? Next up, we have Walking Wake. This guy is a monster in Sun, right? You definitely want to get on Sun, because then, even if you don't bring your Sun Center, your opponent still has the hard prep for it. And you can go for like the pivot set with like flip turn, or you can knock off the opposing floor justice item and really contribute to the game in that sense. But this guy is so incredibly strong on Sun that like even when your opponent knows it's coming, it's very hard to deal with. I'd pair it with like Scissor for killing bulky fairies, and I would say, you know, Rillaboom can really be complementary because it can kind of hit the bulky waters that you don't like, and also keep some recovery for this Ninetales and Torkoal that your team doesn't necessarily, I guess, well, your team needs to use one of them, and keeping them healthy when they don't have their own, like, how do you say? It is embarrassing. Anyway, when you don't want to sit there and click a recovery move on Ninetales, I think it gets Morning Sun, and Torkoal can't recover. Having that nice way of keeping them healthy is very nice. I think that's a really good trio to pick up. Alright, third to last, we have Weavile. Weavile is obviously very strong. This is a late game for us, even though it can be choice band knockoff early in the game, it would already contribute a lot. Its shortcomings definitely lie in that, you know, it's a dark type that does not use that bulk at all. Like, that doesn't use the type at all defensively. It's very bad defensively. It has to be careful of a lot of priority moves, but this guy is so effective with just his stab combination and sometimes low kick that it's still 100% worth it. If you have some Pokemon that can like come in and take hits after you've killed, so you need some like reliable bulky pivots like Scaldurge and Alomomola, that can be very useful. Slowking-G is a fantastic partner. Just kind of focus on allowing this guy to do what he can do and then leave. Oh, that's Walking Wake again. Oop. Zapdos. Zapdos is, like Iron Hands, one of the most reliable Pokemon in the game. It will not fail you, ever, really. You know, it's so strong, even when you only have like, I've been mostly doing like 16 special attack and then like modest, and then put the rest into bulk. And it's so bulky and so strong at the same time. It's got a fantastic typing because Ice and Rock aren't really that common on most draft builds, which means it's very hard to punish this guy. And that really helps. it's really doesn't have that many shortcomings. Empoleon resists everything it's weak to. Quackavolt does that very well as well, and you get a lot out of the turns that you get for free with Quackavolt where you come in on something that, like, if your opponent you just go to just random rock type, you know, that's their free setup turn. I think Maxers is a good partner as well, because this guy can, like, really weaken down teams very effectively, right? It doesn't really end up getting a lot of the kills, but it doesn't need to. Yeah, it's one of the ones that just can't fail, really. See, we can't see Zapdos-Galar at the moment. There we go. Last one, Zapdos-G. Well, this Zapdos-G is so strong, right? It's got this really nice bread and butter set, so it's just dual stab, U-turn, knockoff. All it needs to do, usually. But because you have this ability to go for a bulk up Trailblaze set, there's always this doubt in your opponent. Defiance obviously a fantastic Intimidate punish. It does have an offensively bad type, and using moves that cut its own longevity. But this is really good offensive partner for, like, that I mentioned earlier, right? For like Iron Moth. It's a very good offensive partner, and you can use like Alolan Ninetales screens to make the best out of this guy's sweeping sets. You can pair this with hazards. You get another speed tier for sure. Just kind of focus on letting this guy just hit things, but when you need him to sweep, he can sweep. Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. If you were questioning where a certain Pokemon is, if he's not on the list, he's not in Tier 1. If you have any questions or any comments, please leave them. I will be reading all of them. This is a bit of a chaotic video. I like making it though. Yeah, I'm rambling. If you're still watching and haven't left a comment yet and don't want to leave another comment, just tell me your favorite Tier 1. I don't know. Yeah, that's about it. See you guys.